Cryptids from every state in the United States of America. Alabama. One of the most famous cryptids in Alabama is known as the White Thang, or the White Thang of Alabama. Supposedly, the White Thang is the most famous cryptid from Alabama. The creature has been spotted throughout the 1990s, and the local news, WAFF48, has published articles discussing it. One of the articles discuss how the White Thang and the Sasquatch are different, but how they may be potentially distantly related. Oh, yeah, and if you can tell by the pictures on screen, White Thang is essentially just a big Bigfoot, but he's white, hence the name. Alaska. One of the most interesting cryptids from Alaska is known as Tizaruk, and it is believed to be a sea serpent reported from the subarctic coastal waters of King and Nunavut Islands in the Bering Sea, off the Pacific coast of Alaska. People that have claimed to see Tizaruk typically claim to either only see their head and neck or occasionally the tail. Therefore, the general form of this animal is unknown, but it can allegedly rise out of the water almost 7 to 8 feet. Its head is snake-like and its tail is flippered, but the Tezerek has also been described as a giant caterpillar or worm-like creature. This is essentially the Loch Ness Monster of Alaska. There isn't really much known about this creature, but I thought it would be more interesting than another Bigfoot variant, just so this list isn't full of them. Arizona, the Mogollon Monster. The Mogollon Monster is commonly described as a large bipedal creature, which means it walks on 2 feet. Originally, I thought that meant it had 2 penises, but it turns out he's not that cool. It's also described as being over 7 feet tall with large red eyes. Its body is said to be covered with long black or reddish brown hair, with the exclusion of hair on its chest, face, feet, or hands. Reports claim it also has a strong pungent odor like dead fish, skunk, bad body odor, or even decaying peat moss or the musk of a snapping turtle. Some people claim that the creature is allegedly nocturnal, omnivorous, and territorial, and sometimes violent. In numerous reports, the monster has been said to emit a blood-curdling scream, described as sounding like a woman in great distress. The Mogollon Monster is also known as the Arizona Bigfoot, and is really just an interesting variant of Bigfoot with very similar qualities. Arkansas, the White River Monster. An urban legend in Arkansas is known as the White River Monster, and it's a large creature reportedly first spotted off the banks of the White River near Newport, Arkansas. The White River Monster is reported as having gray skin and as wide as a car and as long as 3 cars. And as news reports spread about this monster, the city began construction on a huge rope and net, but the program actually ended due to a lack of materials and funding. The creature was first spotted in 1915 and is even believed to have an impact on the Civil War. During the Civil War, the White River was used often for transportation, and the monster is supposedly blamed for overturning a boat. The monster was notably spotted again in 1937 and 1971, and there's over 100 confirmed sightings from 1915 to present day. Basically, one of your run-of-the-mill interesting river cryptids. California, the Dark Watchers. I actually have mentioned the Dark Watchers before on my channel, but I like them, so I'm going to mention them again. Oh, and the video I talked about them in is Scariest Mythical Creatures from Around the World, Part 3. The Dark Watchers are tall, sometimes giant-sized, featureless dark silhouettes often seen wearing brimmed hats or even carrying walking sticks. They're only seen during sunrise or sunset, and they are motionless, watching travelers from the horizon, typically seen along the Santa Lucia mountain range. The legend states that no one has been able to see them up close, and if you approach them, they vanish. These are harmless cryptids, and some believe they are simply a reminder that you are not alone in these woods, and to respect nature and your surroundings, or to be aware at all times. They serve as more or less of a gentle warning, and although creepy, I think they're pretty cool. Colorado, Slide Rock Bolter. Slide Rock Bolter is a really strange cryptid from lumberjack folklore, primarily during the 19th and 20th centuries. It is a creature that is believed to live in the mountains of Colorado, but only on mountains with a slope at an angle greater than 45 degrees. It has a huge head, small eyes, a big mouth, and a tail similar to a dolphin with big grab hooks. The best way to describe this cryptid is honestly just a big land whale that slides down mountains to eat people. This creature is said to have caused great unease amongst tourists visiting the mountains of Colorado, and it will often remain motionless for days at a time until groups of tourists walk by its path. At that point, it will release its hooks from the top of the mountain and slide down the mountain to gulp up the entire group of tourists, or at least so the legend goes. This is definitely an interesting cryptid, but it's kind of funny. And if you plan on going to the mountains of Colorado soon, make sure you get your protractor out to make sure the angle is less than 45 degrees, or at least look out for any whale-looking things up the mountain. Connecticut, the Melonheads. The Melonheads are actually a folklore that exists in Ohio, Michigan, and Connecticut, but for this segment, we're only going to be focusing on the ones in Connecticut. The Melonheads are described as small humanoid beings with bulbous heads who occasionally emerge from hiding places and attack people. That's the basic gist. But in Connecticut specifically, according to one telling of the myth, Fairfield County was the location of an asylum for the criminally insane that burned down in the fall of 1960, resulting in the death of all of the staff and most of the patients, except for 10 to to 20 inmates unaccounted for, which supposedly had survived and escaped into the woods. The legend states that the melonheads' appearance is a result of them resorting to cannibalism in order to survive the harsh winters in the region and inbreeding, which caused their heads to swell up and deform. Less of a cryptid, more of like a fairy tale, mythical creature thing. If I haven't made it obvious yet, I'm kind of using the terms interchangeably. But yeah, that's the melonheads. Definitely strange. Delaware, the Pukwudgie. If there's any Exploring with Josh fans watching this video, you might be familiar with the Pukwudgie. Pukwudgies are mythical creatures with shape-shifting abilities, also known for luring people to their deaths using magic and attacking people with poison arrows. They may seem initially friendly, but they turn hostile towards humans. Legend warns against annoying them while they are being friendly, as they retaliate with mischief and harm. Pukwudgie itself roughly translates to little man of the woods that vanishes. And as far as appearance goes, looks like a human-like creature, albeit much shorter, much hairier, and sometimes seen either naked or with very primal-esque clothing. So if you're ever in Delaware or even live in Delaware, make sure you watch out for little elf-looking, mischievous little guys in the woods. Florida, the Muck Monster. In late August of 2009, two members of a non-profit called Lagoon Keepers were attempting to remove what they thought were a log from the Lake Worth Lagoon in Palm Beach, Florida. That log proceeded to give the two non-profit members a runaround of the entire lake, diving deep whenever the boat came within 10 feet of it. During the chase, one of the men called this monster the elusive Muck Monster, and the other man filmed the encounter and put it online. The news picked up the story, and the city quickly took note and did almost everything they could to profit off of the situation. T-shirts were sold, specialty drinks were made in bars, and the city even installed viewfinders along the water. The only real visual that we have on this creature is its wood-like appearance from part of its back poking through the water briefly, which to me seems similar to a snapping turtle, but who knows. So anyways, this creature did end up being pretty good publicity and a decent boost in tourism, which is kind of funny. But as far as the cryptid goes, there's not much information. Georgia, Altamahaha, or Alti. Basically just the Loch Ness Monster of Georgia. It's believed to live in small streams and abandoned rice fields, and sightings are few and far between. There's not a ton of information about this besides the fact that it's extremely similar to the Loch Ness Monster, supposedly. But yeah, this one's kind of uninspired. Moving on. Hawaii. Menehune. Okay, this one's actually cool. Menehune are essentially small dwarves that live in the valleys and rural areas of Hawaii, hidden far, far away from human settlements. The Menehune are also described as superb craftspeople, building temples, fish ponds, roads, canoes, and houses. Some of these structures that Hawaiian folklore attributed to the Menehune existing. They were said to be in Hawaii before settlers from Polynesia migrated many centuries ago. Their favorite food is banana, but they also like fish. Legend has it is that the Menehune only appear during night, and that is when they spend their hours crafting masterpieces. Not much more is known about the Menehune, but I think they're pretty cool dudes. They're just doing their thing, living in a cool place, building cool stuff. You can't hate that. Good job, Hawaii. That's a cool cryptid, or folklore, or mythical creature, or whatever. Idaho. Charlie. Charlie, much like Alti, is basically just a Loch Ness Monster dupe not worth mentioning. Sorry, Idaho. Do better. I honestly thought they would have some sort of potato monster, and maybe they do, but I didn't see it. Illinois. The Enfield Horror. This creature is described as having 3 legs, a short body, 2 short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stands at 4.5 feet tall and is grayish in color. It's definitely a gross and droopy looking creature, and it's honestly pretty creepy as well. Its first sighting was in the early 1970s in the small town of Enfield, Illinois, hence the name. During one of the first sightings, a very convincing story got out and got media attention, and this caused a lot of hunters to become excited about the prospect of finding and killing the Enfield Horror. For a while, tourists traveled and hunters began hunting, both looking for this gray creature in the woods. All of these hunts were unsuccessful, and as the hunting and tourism enthusiasm died down, 4 more sightings were reported since. Indiana. Mesha Kennebec, also known as the Manitow Monster, is an Indiana cryptid that is said to live in Lake Manitow for over centuries, being spotted by Native Americans and early settlers. By those who have seen it, it's been described as 60 feet long with the head of a bull with a serpent body. It is more or less of your run-of-the-mill lake monster, but it wasn't an exact ripoff of the Loch Ness Monster, so I thought I'd give it a bit more attention. Pretty cool, and the Native American ties are always interesting because their folklore is great, but that's about all I got. Iowa. Van Meter Monster. The Van Meter Monster is reported to be a 9-foot-tall winged bat-like creature, also known as the Van Meter Visitor. This creature was said to shoot light from its horns and is immune to bullets. Witnesses made plaster casts of its 3-toed footprints after a confrontation. The creature has been seen disappearing into a nearby coal mine, and similar sightings have continued up until the 2010s. Today, there is even a commemorative event, and it's held around the anniversary of the sightings. Pretty cool. I like that it gets the community together. It seems scary. Kind of reminds me of Mothman. 8 out of 10. Let's keep going. This video is kind of evolving, so now it's more, now I'm just ranking these guys. Okay. If I lose any more brain cells, this might just end up being a tier list. Kansas. Deer Woman. Deer Woman, or sometimes known as Deer Lady, is a spirit from Native American mythology. She can be seen in two forms, either a beautiful young woman with deer feet or just a deer. And her general vibe can kind of shift depending on the context of who she's dealing with, but for the most part, she has her sights set on men who have harmed women and children, and to them, she is vengeful and murderous, typically known for luring these men to their death. Overall, Deer Woman's got a pretty cool vibe. Good job, Kansas. Kentucky. The Pope Lick Monster. Yeah, you heard that right. We're already off to a weird start. The Pope Lick Monster. Unfortunately, this monster is not known for licking the Pope, but it doesn't get much better. Pope Lick Monster, or more commonly known as Goat Man, is a legendary part man, part goat, and even part sheep creature, reported to live beneath the railroad that goes over Pope Lick Creek in Fisherville, Louisville, Kentucky. Legends about the Goat Man claim that it uses hypnosis and voice mimicry to lead trespassers on its bridge either onto the tracks in the way of a oncoming train or to below the bridge where it can attack them with a blood-stained axe. Typically, Goatman would make its voice sound like the voice of either someone else or even potentially someone familiar to you, making you want to see who's talking to you and where they are. Some legends state that Goatman is so vengeful because he was treated so poorly during his lifetime for being such a different creature, at least different by human standards. And some legends state that Goatman is simply a reincarnation of a farmer who made a deal with the devil. Either way, he's definitely strange looking, and if you're passing by a bridge in Pope Lick, Kentucky, don't lick the Pope, don't go under the bridge, don't go over the bridge, and if you hear somebody you think you know, you don't. Get out of there. Louisiana. Fille Fouillée. To describe what you're looking at, let me give you a bit of context. The story of Fille Fouillée starts in Acadia. Legend states that there was a blacksmith named Will Smith. No, not Will Smith. Will Smith. And when Will Smith died and went up to heaven, he was given a second chance at life. But that second life he lived was not a good one. Unfortunately, he chose to do evil this time around. Because of this, the second time he died, the devil doomed him to live on earth forever with only a single coal to warm him. That is why this cryptid or spirit is only really seen as a dimly lit orb in the distance. There is typically no figure associated with this creature. Fille Fouillée spends his time in the swamps of southern Louisiana trying to lure people out deep into the swamp to their death. It is advised that anybody near the swamp at night avoid following any strange dim lights in the distance, as the ending is never truly good. Maine. Kawakwa. Kawakwa is a cryptid from Abenaki folklore from northeastern United States, specifically Maine. The creature is described as a giant, cannibalistic, half-animal, half-human creature that roamed the forests of present-day New England in ancient times. The Kawakwa is described as being a former human whose heart turned to ice, either because of evil spirit possession or because they committed a crime that was truly dreadful, like cannibalism. The only sensation the Kawakwa is able to feel is an insatiable hunger, and their existence is pretty pitiful. They are no longer claimed to exist, so there is no risk to you or me, but if you have a time machine and go back to ancient times and decide to go to New England of all places, look out for the Kawakwa. It may want to eat you. And by may want to eat you, I mean he will lick and nibble you from head to toe. Maryland. Chessie. Can you guess what this creature is going to be? Did you guess another Loch Ness Monster type creature? Could you guess because the name is completely uninspired? Well, congratulations, you have a functioning brain. Chessie, not to be confused with Nessie as in the Loch Ness Monster as in the cool one, is a reptilian type creature that is reported to be either black or brown that has been seen as early as 1936 in the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. Not gonna go too deep on this one, pretty uninspired. Loch Ness Monster clone, Salmonella clone. Sorry, Maryland. Let's keep going. Massachusetts. Thunderbirds. The Thunderbird is a legendary creature, especially if you're a North American indigenous person who's really into art and culture. The Thunderbird is considered to be a supernatural being with supernatural power and strength. A Thunderbird can be best described as a very large eagle with supernatural powers. Some of those powers being the ability to create thunder by simply flapping its wings, and also the ability to cause lightning by flashing its eyes. The Thunderbird has very deep ties to indigenous people's history and culture, and for that reason, the history and lore is deep, and I'm definitely doing it a disservice by going over it this quickly, but it's pretty cool. 10 out of 10. Good job, Massachusetts. Michigan. The Michigan Dogman. The Michigan Dogman is essentially the Michigan equivalent of a werewolf, but it's still kind of cool. The Michigan Dogman is a cryptid that was allegedly witnessed in 1887 in the lower peninsula of Michigan. It is described as being a 7-foot-tall, blue or amber-eyed bipedal canine with the torso of a man and a fearsome howl that sounds like a human screaming. According to the legend, the Michigan Dogman only appears in a 10-year cycle that falls on years ending in 7, for example, 2007, 2017, 2027. The majority of these sightings have taken place in the southern part of Michigan. And for as how ferocious and scary the Dogman may seem, many believers say that the Dogman can be scared away simply by clapping at it, which is kind of hilarious. Oh, and if you're able to scare away the Dogman without using your hands, give me a call. Only because I totally might need you to save me one day. Minnesota. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is by far one of the most well-known mythical creatures, folklore creatures, urban legends, cryptids, whatever you want to call it. If you're watching this video, you probably know about it. And honestly, for good reason. It's cool looking, the lore is deep, and it might even be real. I've already discussed it on the channel, but I'm gonna describe it again because it's really cool and I know you guys want to hear it. For starters, the Wendigo isn't just from Minnesota, it's kind of from all over the place, all across North America. I felt it was best fitting here because Minnesota was kind of slim pickings, and it was a good middle ground between all of the possible locations Wendigos could be from. The Wendigo is often said to be a malevolent spirit, sometimes depicted as a creature with human-like characteristics which possesses humans. The victims of the Wendigo feel an insatiable hunger and have the desire to eat other humans and commit horrible murders often. In some representations, the Wendigo is described as a giant humanoid with a heart of ice and whose approach is signaled by its foul stench and sudden, unseasonable chill. If this sounds familiar, it's likely because we just spoke about the Kawakwa, which is a very similar creature with its hunger and heart of ice. And I'm not sure who came first, the chicken or the egg, but I know that the Wendigo is a lot more popular. Wendigos are definitely scary and super interesting cryptids, and I would recommend looking into them deeper or maybe watching this video about mythical creatures that mentions the Wendigo. But for the scope of this mega compilation, I'm gonna cut it here. Great job, Minnesota. Mississippi. The Pascagoula River Aliens. The Pascagoula River Aliens aren't just any aliens. They are the aliens associated with a pretty famous UFO sighting and alien abduction account from 1973. For context, on the evening of October 11th, 1973, 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker told the Jackson County, Mississippi Sheriff's Office that while they were out fishing, they not only saw aliens but were abducted by them. They claimed that the aliens paralyzed them but kept them conscious and examined them for hours before later releasing them. This isn't about the abduction, but actually about the aliens themselves. These aliens were described as having robotic slit mouths and crab-like pincers. They had more or less of a humanoid body commonly associated with gray-ish aliens, but these ones seemed just a little bit different. You be the judge if specific aliens count as cryptids, but in my case they do, and honestly Mississippi was kind of dry, so I thought this was interesting. Shout out Pascagoula. Missouri. The Ozark Howler. The Ozark Howler, unsurprisingly, is said to live in the dense forests of the Ozarks, which span across Missouri, Arkansas, and Kansas. But for this segment, we're focusing on the howlers that live specifically in Missouri. The howler is typically described as being bear-sized, with a thick body, stocky legs, and black, shaggy hair, accompanied with glowing red eyes and prominent horns. Its cry is often described as being the combination of a wolf's howl and an elk's bugle, also combined with the laugh of a hyena. Sounds like a pretty horrible trio. The howler is said to be a fierce hunter and a protector of the wilderness, also with supernatural abilities and a fierce protective nature. So if you're in the Ozarks, specifically in Missouri, and you don't want to encounter the Ozark howler, respect the wilderness, don't go out at night, and if you do hear a terrifying sound, just go home. Montana. The Flathead Lake Monster. Loch Ness Monster variant, but with antlers. The coolest thing about this cryptid is a Native American legend surrounding it, which I'm gonna tell now. According to legend, long ago, the first native tribe to live in the area lived in an island in the middle of the lake. One winter, while they were crossing the frozen lake to move to another camp, two girls saw antlers approximately 2 feet in length protruding from the frozen ice. Thinking the antlers belonged to some animals, the girls decided to chop them off and take them. While trying to take off these antlers with sharp rocks, the antlers started to shake and the ice split open all around around them. The monster's head opened, appearing through the ice, and shook its giant antlers. These girls used special abilities to transform into balls and escape the monster, but half of their tribe drowned in that lake. That's the story. So, moral of the story, don't steal antlers you find in the ice, because if you do, you might live if you have the ability to turn into a ball, but you're gonna kill all your friends, so don't do it. Nebraska, the Alkali Lake Monster. The Alkali Lake Monster is a huge alligator-like horned creature that lives in, you guessed it, the Alkali Lake in Nebraska. It's not a direct Loch Ness Monster ripoff, so that's why I'm giving it a bit more love. This monster is claimed to have rough grayish brown skin and also is 40 feet long, and like I mentioned before, it has a horn in between its eyes on its head. The legend states that this lake monster consumes livestock in large quantities, causes earthquakes, and even disorients travelers that get too close to it. According to my research, I couldn't confirm if it was believed to be supernatural or not, but I'm gonna assume it was because not many creatures cause earthquakes. Unless they're super thick, which is a completely different story. Nevada, Tahoe Tessie. Nevada's Loch Ness Monster, moving on. New Hampshire, Wood Devils. Wood Devils are believed to be one or a small group of Bigfoot-like creatures in the woodland hills of Coos County, New Hampshire. They have been spotted since the 1930s and described as tall, around 7 to 9 feet, with shaggy tan gray hair and very similar to Bigfoot's, besides the fact that they are slightly skinnier. A strange trait about this cryptid specifically is that they refuse to hide behind trees. If they are already behind a tree, they will hide behind it. But if humans are coming near them and they are not near cover, they will simply stand still and stare at you until you leave. Kind of creepy, kind of cool, that's about it. New Jersey, the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is a legendary cryptid that is said to inhabit the forests of the Pine Barrens in South Jersey. This cryptid is described as a two-legged, goat-like, bat-like creature with hooves. Let me explain. The creature is said to walk on 2 hooved feet, have a goat-like body and a horse-like head with 2 large, leathery, bat-like wings on its back. It's also said to have a forked or pointed tail as well. Oh, and its hands aren't hooves, its hands actually have claws. The legend states that it moves quickly and is often described as emitting a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. This may sound obvious, but the New Jersey Devils, the official NHL team of New Jersey, is actually named after this cryptid, which is pretty cool. Now that I think about it, this might be the first time I've ever mentioned sports in this channel, which is kind of funny. New Mexico, Teratorns. Okay, this one's a bit interesting because this is actually a real creature kind of mixed with cryptid mythology. Teratorns are prehistoric birds that were the ancestors of modern day vultures. Skeletons that have been found measure their wingspans to be over 20 feet long, and they were thought to have weighed over 100 pounds, which for a bird is insane. These birds are presumed to be extinct, but they have found numerous skeletons. Why I mention this on this list is because in New Mexico, the Thunderbird cryptid mythology that we mentioned earlier exists in New Mexico as well, and it is believed that the Thunderbirds were potentially based off of the Teratorns, which existed long before ancient peoples, but they still somehow had knowledge of them and maybe even encountered them. New York, Champ. Champ is the Loch Ness Monster of Lake Champlain in New York. That's about it. North Carolina. Wampus. Wampus, or the Wampus cat, is a cryptid based in Appalachian folklore. It is described as a fearsome hybrid between a mountain lion and a woman, but kind of just displays itself as a mountain lion with 6 legs. Believers claim that the Wampus cat roams the wilderness, emitting eerie sounds to strike terror into the hearts of those who encounter it. It's simple, but kind of cool. I'll give it that. North Dakota. Thunderbirds. I don't know how I accidentally made this the same cryptid for 2 different states, and this is the 3rd mention I've had of this cryptid in this video, so yeah, Thunderbirds, woo, let's keep going. Ohio. Loveland Frogman. The Loveland Frogman is simply described as a humanoid frog creature that stands at about 4 feet tall. Honestly, more of a chill dude than a cryptid, but figured you guys would like him. Say hi, Frogman. Oh yeah. If you've made it this far, say hi Frogman in the comments to say hi to Frogman and also to confuse people that haven't made it this far yet. Oklahoma, the Oklahoma octopus. The Oklahoma octopus is a cryptid that is said to live in man-made freshwater lakes in Oklahoma where it attacks and kills unsuspecting swimmers, and that's it. Oregon, Gumbaroo. The Gumbaroo is described by early lumberjacks as being larger than a bear with tougher, shiny black skin that absolutely nothing could pierce. It is even claimed that bullets just bounce off the thing. And according to the legend, the only way to kill it is with fire. And if you set it on fire, it literally explodes. This cryptid does have a good name, so congrats, Oregon. Nice job, Gumbaroo. Pennsylvania, the Squonk. Shout out to Pennsylvania for having one of the most depressing cryptids there is. The squonk is more or less of a pig-like creature that only walks around at dusk and dawn. It is covered with extremely loose skin that is littered with warts and moles. The squonk is famously known for being perpetually unhappy and always crying, like a lot. Skilled hunters can even track down the squonk by finding its tear-stained trail. And when the squonk is concerned, frightened, or feels like it may be in danger, it can literally dissolve into a puddle of tears to escape any danger. Doesn't get much sadder than that. Rhode Island. Vampire Mercy Brown. The cryptid for this one technically is just vampires, but this story is kind of interesting and unique to Rhode Island specifically. The Mercy Brown vampire incident occurred in 1892 during what is known now as the New England Vampire Panic. At the time, tuberculosis was running rampant, and for some reason, people thought that this disease outbreak was caused by the influence of the undead. During this time, the people would perform rituals to banish the undead from our plane of existence forever. Why this is called the Mercy Brown vampire incident is because during this time, the Brown family had their daughter, Mercy, die of tuberculosis. Friends and neighbors of the Brown family believed that one of the family members was a vampire, although they didn't call them that at the time. This was in accordance to folklore at the time, which linked multiple deaths in a family to undead activity, aka vampire activity. The story goes a lot deeper, but as you know, this video is long. Rhode Island, vampires, let's keep going. South Carolina. The Gray Man. The Gray Man is a legendary cryptid from South Carolina that is considered a friendly ghost. He appears on beaches and shores, particularly before hurricanes and other strong storms. The legend states that he was on his way to propose to the love of his life when he was killed, and now his spirit wanders South Carolina, warning others of impending danger. The legend states that if you encounter the Gray Man before a storm, you will be protected and your entire house may be saved. This is a pretty interesting and potentially our first upbeat cryptid on the list, so good job, South Carolina. I like this one. South Dakota. Tekuhi. Tekuhi means big man in the Lakota language, who are the indigenous peoples of South Dakota. Tekuhi is said to be a supernatural being who serves as a guardian spirit protecting land from invaders and malevolent creatures that hunt humans and animals. He is a cryptid that protects the nature and humans and animals from other cryptids, and for that reason, he's okay in my book, which is why I discussed this Bigfoot dupe. Tennessee. The Tennessee Wildman. The Tennessee Wildman is basically the opposite of Tekuhi. Like Tekuhi, he is a 7-foot tall, dark-haired, humanoid creature, although that's about where it ends. He has piercing red eyes and screams a disturbing war cry that frightens anything that hears it. He smells awful, kind of like Bigfoot, but he is extremely aggressive. The Tennessee Wildman is extremely strong, fast, and agile, and is extremely territorial as well. He has an obsession with targeting dogs and women, and although he is typically seen trying to attack women, he has never been successful, as these women always find a way to escape. What do you guys think? Evil Bigfoot, cool or not cool? Texas. Donkey Lady. Donkey Lady is the famous cryptid said to haunt the Donkey Lady Bridge in San Antonio, Texas. According to the legend, the bridge is inhabited by the spirit of a woman who is horribly disfigured by a fire, leading to her being referred to as the Donkey Lady. It is said that she haunts the bridge, appearing to unsuspecting travelers who pass by, and the legend also states that she may even chase or attack those who get too close to her bridge. Kind of feel bad for the lady. She got made fun of for something she couldn't control, but at least she's getting revenge. Good for her. Do you, Donkey Lady. Utah. Skinwalkers. No video about cryptids is truly complete until you mention skinwalkers, and this video is no different. In Navajo culture, a skinwalker is a type of harmful witch who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. Skinwalkers typically use these disguises or possessions to stalk their prey and kill and attack people. They also have other supernatural abilities such as super strength and voice mimicry to lead people to their certain death. The skinwalker lore is deep and goes far beyond the scope of this video, but I have made a video discussing them in the past. They're very cool, and check them out after this video if you want. Vermont. The Northfield Pigman. The Northfield Pigman is a cryptid or urban legend from Northfield, Vermont. Descriptions of the Pigman vary, but he is typically described as a humanoid creature with the body of a large pig, but with the features of a man. Sightings of the Pigman have been reported across rural areas surrounding Northfield and often in the vicinity of old farmhouses or abandoned buildings. Some interpretations believe that Pigman is the result of an experimentation gone wrong or a spirit of a deceased farmer seeking revenge. Although the origins are still unknown and often debated. Pigman is definitely creepy and sometimes is even even described as just a boy that went missing in the woods who decided to wear a pig's face as a mask. But yeah, lots of lore, kind of creepy. Good job, Vermont. Virginia, Snallygaster. Like almost every cryptid, descriptions of the Snallygaster vary, but it is often depicted as a fearsome dragon-like creature with large wings, sharp claws, and a metallic beak lined with razor-sharp teeth. According to the folklore, it preys on livestock and unsuspecting travelers, specifically children, by swooping down from the skies and snatching its victims. Some variants of the Snallygaster say it has tentacles instead of razor-sharp teeth, but either way, it's a terrifying-looking creature. Washington, the Concert Lake Monster. The Loch Ness Monster, but in Washington. West Virginia, Mothman. The legend of the cryptid known as Mothman originates from the 1960s in Point Pleasant in West Virginia. Mothman is described as a winged humanoid creature with glowing red eyes and is believed to be a sign of impending disasters. The Mothman legend has taken Point Pleasant by storm, and there is so much tourist attractions based around it, and I have covered Mothman in another video of mine, so I won't go too deep into details. But there are many stories where he is seen jumping at cars from the side of the road and jumping on the top of cars that are parked in rural locations at night. It is a creepy cryptid that showed up and almost as fast as it appeared, disappeared from the zeitgeist. It is now simply a figment of our imagination. Wisconsin, the Beast of Bray Road. The Beast of Bray Road is described as a 7-foot-tall humanoid-style creature covered in hair or fur with the head of a large wolf that also has glowing red or orange eyes. It's been seen running on 2 and 4 legs, and some reports describe it as being close to a werewolf, and others say it's more close to a Bigfoot-style cryptid. Not really a ton going on here, but what can you expect? It's Wisconsin. Just kidding, Wisconsin. I love ya. Wyoming, Jackalope. Admittedly, this is likely my favorite cryptid on the entire list, simply because I find it cute, and honestly, I hope it exists. Or at least did at one point. The jackalope is a cryptid that is described as being a rabbit with antelope horns, and that's basically it. They're pretty iconic in the Wyoming area, urban legend scene, and even pop culture as well. I know this video is alphabetical, but we kind of saved the best for last, unintentionally. And with that, bros, I have to say thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you know that I do take your feedback into consideration, and I know you guys have been asking for longer videos, and I know you guys have been asking for dark mode videos, so I thought with this video, I would give you both of those. Also, it's been a while since I talked about mythical creatures, cryptids, folklore, urban legends, all of it. So I thought, why not bring it back with this banger video? Serial killers from every state in the United States of America. Alabama. Thomas Whisenant. Thomas Warren Whisenant was born and committed his crimes in Alabama. He was born on January 29th, 1947, and was convicted for the murders of 3 women between 1976 and 1977. He abducted, assaulted, and murdered these victims and then mutilated their bodies. Whisenant was arrested in 1977 after being caught in the act of disposing of a victim's body. He was convicted and then sentenced to death in 1978, and despite multiple attempts to appeal this decision, he was executed via lethal injection on May 27th, 2010. Gruesome start to this video, and it doesn't get much better. Also, it's just wild to me that someone could be on death row for 32 years. Moving on. Alaska. Robert Hansen. Robert Christian Bose Hansen was born on February 15th, 1939 in Iowa, but later moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where he lived a life of crime. Hansen was also known as the Butcher Baker for reasons we'll get into, and this individual was seriously twisted. He was an active serial killer in Alaska from 1972 to 1983, a total of 11 years, and unfortunately in that time assaulted and murdered 17 women, or I should say at least 17 murders and assaults. It is alleged that he has up to 37 kills and up to over 31 assaults as well. One of his methods of killing these women would be abducting them and then releasing them into the wilderness, where he would then hunt them for sport using guns and even hunting knives, which obviously plays in the name of the Butcher Baker, and the baker part comes from the fact that he actually owned a successful bakery. Hansen was caught after all of these years when one of his victims who got away led police directly to him. Once caught, he confessed and was sentenced to 461 years in prison without possibility of parole. This monster died in prison on August 21st, 2014. Arizona. Mark Godot. Mark Godot was born on September 6th, 1964 in Phoenix, Arizona. Although his time active was only a mere 10 months, the level of terror he was able to bring to the Phoenix metro area was almost unbelievable. Mark Godot, also known as the Baseline Killer, was a serial killer, kidnapper, thief, and assaulter. In this 10-month spree from 2005 to 2006, not only did he commit 9 murders, but has also committed 84 other felony charges. Mark Godot was a seriously bad guy, and in 2006 was sentenced to multiple death sentences, and now he currently awaits execution on death row. According to the available data, he was only active as a serial killer and serial assaultist for the 10 months that it claims, although I find it hard to believe that Mark was simply a great dude before this time frame. One reason I believe this is because one of the felonies that he committed, mind you, one of the total 93, is a crime that involves him robbing and assaulting a 12-year-old girl at gunpoint. Scum. Moving on. Arkansas. Ronald Gene Simmons. No, not Gene Simmons, the guy your dad thinks is really cool, the guy that your dad paints his face like, the guy that your dad gets too drunk listening to and hits you. That's Gene Simmons. This is Ronald Gene Simmons. Back on a serious note, Ronald Gene Simmons was a mass murderer who killed 16 people, including 14 family members. Almost as if he was competing with Mark Godot, who committed 9 murders in 10 months, Ronald Gene Simmons committed 16 murders in only 7 days. In Arkansas during December 1987. Ronald G. Simmons was born on July 15, 1940. Simmons served in the military before moving to Arkansas, and on December 22nd to 28th in 1987, he methodically murdered his family members at his home and then later killed 2 other people and injured 4 more in a nearby town. He was arrested without resistance and was convicted of the murder. Simmons was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection on June 25th, 1990. Gene Simmons from the band Kiss wanted to rock and roll all night and party every day. Ronald Gene Simmons from Arkansas wanted to kill people. California. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, is likely one of the most infamous names on this list. Strangely, I have never covered him on the channel, even though I've made numerous videos about serial killers. Ramirez was born on February 29th, 1960 in El Paso, Texas, but moved to California at the age of 22. Ramirez's crimes were heavily influenced by his troubled childhood, and he even had a cousin who taught him military skills that Ramirez ended up later using during his killing spree. That killing spree and honestly crime spree, which also included assaults and burglaries, took place in the greater Los Angeles area from 1984 to 1985. During this time, he committed numerous heinous crimes such as home invasions, murders, and assaults. His crime spree, marked by extreme violence and satanic rituals, created widespread fear throughout the LA area. And fortunately, he was caught on August 31st, 1985, where he was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 assaults, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death and remained on death row until he died of cancer on June 7th, 2013. Colorado. Scott Lee Kimball. Scott Lee Kimball was a former FBI informant who was convicted of murdering at least 4 people between 2003 and 2004 while working with the FBI. Kimball was born on September 21st, 1966 in Boulder, Colorado. Kimball was a skilled forager who ran a legitimate business buying and selling organic beef, but primarily used his business as a vessel to enrich himself by passing on bad checks and other forged documents. This is relevant because Kimball would forge documents of his murder victims to make it appear as if they were still alive after they were already dead. Kimball exploited his informant status to evade suspicion and continued his crimes until inconsistencies caught up to him and he was arrested. Not only did he expose flaws in the FBI's informant program, but he was also sentenced to 70 years in prison, where he currently stays today. Oh, and if you're curious who the victims were, it was his uncle, his stepdaughter, and 2 of the girlfriends of inmates. This is almost exactly what I meant when I said that I don't believe someone who was an active serial killer was just a good person before their killing spree. This is a great example of that. Connecticut. Michael Ross. Michael Bruce Ross was born on July 26, 1959 in Connecticut. Ross was also known as the Roadside Strangler and the Eggman, whatever that means. Between 1981 and 1984, he murdered and assaulted 8 young women in New York and Connecticut. According to people that knew him growing up, he exhibited antisocial behavior from a very young age. He was sentenced to death for his crimes in 1987 and was executed via lethal injection in 2005. A fun fact about Michael Ross is that he was the last person to be executed in Connecticut before they abolished capital punishment in 2012. Delaware. Stephen Pennell. Stephen Brian Pennell, also known as the Route 40 Killer, was born on November 22nd, 1957. Interestingly, Pennell is Delaware's only known serial killer in modern history. Good job, Delaware. But unfortunately, that doesn't make his situation any better. Pennell was convicted of the murder and assault of 2 women and was suspected of 3 others. As the name suggests, he abducted most of his victims on Route 40. Pennell was sentenced to death and executed via lethal injection in 1992, making him the first person executed in Delaware in over 46 years. Florida. Eileen Wuornos. I've actually covered Eileen on the channel before, and her story is really quite interesting. Not only was she a female serial killer, but she was a female sex worker who targeted her male client. From 1989 to 1990, while she was working as a prostitute along the highways of Florida, Eileen killed and robbed 7 of her male clients. When caught, she claimed that she was simply defending herself from assault, but that story didn't quite work. Wuornos was arrested in 1991 and convicted of 6 murders and was executed via lethal injection in 2002. Fun fact about Eileen is that there's actually a movie made about her story called Monster, which released in 2003. Georgia. Wayne Williams. Williams, also known as the Atlanta Monster, the Atlanta Boogeyman, and the Atlanta Child Killer, was born on May 27th, 1958. Wayne was only ever convicted of 2 murders, those being the murders of 2 adult men. But what's peculiar is the fact that he is heavily suspected of being responsible for the murder of 24 children. From 1979 to 1981, there was a spree of child murders in Atlanta known as the Atlanta Child Murders. I find it quite interesting that there's enough evidence to heavily suspect Wayne of being responsible for a very specific number of these murders, but not enough evidence to convict him. I guess it's fortunate that he was at least convicted of these 2 adult murders, but I'm sure his story would be much different if he was convicted of at least some of the child murders he was suspected of committing. Hawaii. Randall Saito. Randall Saito is admittedly not a serial killer, but he is still a killer. Saito randomly and brutally killed a woman at Ala Moana Center in 1979, and since then has been spending time in a mental institution as he was acquitted of this murder due to insanity. That's upsetting and scary. What else is scary is the fact that he escaped the mental hospital in 2017. He walked out of the facility, took a taxi to the airport, and flew to California using a fake name. Fortunately, Saito was caught days later and was charged an additional 5 years for the escape, but his escape definitely raised questions about the security lapses at the hospital. Like, I know Hawaii is laid back and chill, but it boggles my mind that in 2017, not 1987, in 2017, he just walked out, took a taxi, and took a flight with a fake name. Wild. Idaho. Paul Ezra Rhodes. Paul is one of your more or less cookie-cutter serial killers. He went on a killing spree, killed young women, was convicted of some of the murders, was suspected of more, and was executed via lethal injection. Like everyone on this list, this dude was horrible and disgusting. Illinois. John Wayne Gacy. If you're the type of person to be watching this video, then you're probably the type of person who knows who John Wayne Gacy is. He is one of the most infamous American serial killers and is widely known for his assault, torture, and murder of at least 33 young men and boys. Gacy's story is long and well documented, and I will only be giving a brief overview in this video, but if you're interested, there's a lot of documentaries. Gacy famously lived a double life, as he was seen as a pillar of the community by throwing events for the neighborhood. He was a manager at KFC and then started a construction business after spending some time in jail. Gacy was known as the Killer Clown because during his community events, he would typically dress up as a clown to entertain his neighbors. Although, unfortunately, for some of his victims, he would also dress up as the clown and assault and murder them. Gacy's story is extremely disturbing and was ultimately caught when bodies were discovered underneath his floor in his basement. Gacy was arrested on December 21st, 1978. He was then sentenced to death in 1980 and executed via, you guessed it, lethal injection in 1994. If a clown ever asks you if you want to try getting out of handcuffs, don't do it. Indiana. Herb Baumeister. Baumeister is a serial killer from Indiana and was active from the 1980s to the 1990s. He is suspected to have murdered at least 11 men and possibly all the way up to over 25 men. Due to the fact that there was no trial, this is all suspected, which is something we'll get into, but it's pretty certain. Why I say that is because human remains were found on Baumeister's property. Not only were the remains of 11 men found on the property, but there was also over 10,000 bone fragments scattered across the grounds of his farm. It is believed that Baumeister would lure victims into his home, specifically gay men, where he would then assault them and then kill them before burying their bodies. Once the police caught on and began looking for Baumeister, he had already escaped to Canada, where he took his own life in a national park before police could ever catch up to him. And for that reason, he was never convicted and never sentenced. But I think he knew what he had coming. Iowa. Earl Nelson. Earl Nelson is one of the oldest entries on this list so far, being born on May 12th, 1897 in California. Earl Nelson was also known as the Gorilla Man or the Dark Strangler. He was a serial killer, a assaultist, and a necrophile, and was also considered to be the first known serial assault murderer in the 20th century. He committed over 22 murders and also 22 separate attacks all across the west coast of the United States, including primarily Iowa. Nelson targeted landladies and their daughters and would gain entry to their homes by posing as a prospective tenant. He would then strangle the victims and do extremely unspeakable things. Nelson was caught in Canada, of all places, in 1927 and was executed by hanging, not lethal injection. So there you go, something new. Kansas. Dennis Rader. Okay, so this guy is wild. Everybody on this list is a complete lunatic, but this one in particular, I just finished watching a documentary about him. He was known as the BTK killer, which is actually an acronym for his routine, I guess you could say. He would bind, torture, and then kill his victims. And that's how he referred to himself as well. He was active in Wichita, Kansas from 1974 until 1991, a huge gap. What's even crazier is that he wasn't even caught until 2005 when he was arrested and pled guilty to all of the murders. What's potentially even crazier than his time active as a killer, or the large gap after his active period where he was just still free, is the fact that he would also, during his time active, would taunt the media outlets and police by leaving detailed messages describing his crimes. The only reason he was ever even caught is because in 2004, after a 13-year hiatus, he decided it was a good time to start rewriting letters and begin taunting the police again, when at this point, technology was advanced and they weren't playing around, and they caught him shortly after in the following year, and he was arrested, like I mentioned, in 2005. He's currently serving 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Kentucky. Donald Harvey. This monster is a little bit different than some of the other monsters on this list. Harvey was a killer who claimed to have 87 murders, but was only confirmed to have 37. Still a ludicrous amount. He was active in Ohio, Kentucky between 1970 and 1987, a 17-year span. He gave himself the name the Angel of Death, and it'll all make sense in a sec. Harvey was a healthcare worker and said that he started killing his patients to simply put them out of their misery, but said he eventually grew to enjoy killing his patients. Harvey would typically kill his victims by poisoning them with cyanide or suffocating them with a pillow. How Harvey was caught after doing this for so long, 17 years, is because the last victim he ever killed was a man who was on life support for several months after a motorcycle accident. His autopsy revealed the large amount of cyanide in his system, and then people began to grow suspicious, specifically of Harvey. They became extremely suspicious of him when they learned that he was forced to reside from a previous job in a Cincinnati hospital when he was caught stealing body parts for an occult ritual. Wild that he was even able to continue working in healthcare at all. Harvey lived in prison from 1987 all the way up until 2017 when he was found in his cell severely beaten and then later succumbed to his injuries and died in prison. It's crazy to me that someone working in healthcare with a very strange and peculiar history is able to kill at least 37 people over 17 years and not get caught for so long. We're not even halfway done this video yet, and we've heard some disgusting and deplorable stories. And I'm sorry to inform you, it doesn't get much better. So I did want to take just a quick breather before we got back into it. Louisiana. Derek Todd Lee. Lee was born on November 5th, 1968, and was from St. Francisville in Louisiana. He is also known as the Baton Rouge serial killer and is known for his killing spree from 1998 all the way up to 2003, where during this time, he terrorized Baton Rouge and surrounding areas by committing at least 7 murders of, you guessed it, women. Before his murders, he was a great guy, right? No, not at all. Before his murder charges, Lee was actually arrested for stalking women and watching them in their own home. In an interesting twist, despite this previous arrest, during the search for this serial killer, the police overlooked him because they assumed the serial killer was white. However, Lee was eventually linked to all of these murders of these women in Louisiana via DNA tests, and in 2004, he was put on trial and was sentenced to death. Lee did not end up being killed via lethal injection because he actually died of heart disease in the hospital while on death row at the ripe old age of 47. Maine. James Hicks. Hicks is the only known serial killer from the state of Maine, and information on him was not easy to find. But the long and short of the story is, in 1977, his wife magically disappeared, which caused suspicion but not that much suspicion because Hicks was not arrested until 1983 and convicted a year later in 1984. Before this arrest, another woman went missing who was last seen at a bar with Hicks. He was never arrested for this disappearance because there was never enough evidence to connect him to it, but after he was suspected of his wife's disappearance 6 years later, they tied the two together. For both of these disappearances, he was only sentenced to 10 years and only served 6 of them and was released from prison in 1990. Once he was released, he met another woman, started a life with her, moved in with her, and 6 years later, murdered her. He was suspected in her disappearance, but Hicks was never charged with her death either because of a lack of evidence. This guy was slimy. The only reason that Hicks was caught is because he was in Texas holding a gun to a 67-year-old woman's head, forcing her to sign over the title of her car to him and then write a note you would write to your loved ones telling them you won't be around, if you get my drift. He planned to drug and drown the woman to make it look like she did it, but this woman somehow escaped and Hicks was caught for this act, sentenced to 55 years, and during this time confessed to the 3 other murders he committed and actually led the Maine authorities directly to the sites where he buried these bodies. But yeah, Maine's only serial killer was a disgusting guy who got way too lucky for way too long. Maryland. Joe Matheny. Matheny is a hilarious name, specifically for this dude, because he looks like he enjoys meth-eny. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and claimed to have killed 13 people, but was only ever convicted of 2 of these murders. Research later confirmed 3 additional victims through matching his confessions to evidence. So he was convicted of 2, confirmed 5, and claims up to 13. He specifically preyed on homeless men and prostitutes, luring them in with the promise of food and drugs, and actually would just give them death. Notably, Matheny dismembered some of his victims and even disposed of their remains at a meat stand where he worked. He was arrested in 1996, convicted of multiple murders, and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. And in 2017, he was found dead in his cell. So that's him. Massachusetts. Albert DeSalvo. DeSalvo, also known as the Boston Strangler, I think the 3rd or 4th strangler on this list so far, is a serial killer who confessed to the murder of at least 13 women in the Boston area between 1962 and 1964. DeSalvo would gain entry to his victims' homes by posing as a handyman. He, not shockingly, would strangle his victims to death. Very interestingly, DeSalvo was never convicted for any of these murders, but was imprisoned for other crimes. In 1973, in prison, he was actually murdered due to an ongoing debate that had taken place in the prison about his involvement with the Boston Strangler cases. So you could say justice was served, but not in the traditional sense. Michigan. Carl Eugene Watts. Watts was born in 1953 in Texas and might have the highest kill count on this list so far. Not that that's an accomplishment at all. It is just a morbid fact. Watts was nicknamed Coral and was dubbed by media outlets the Sunday Morning Slasher, who murdered an insane amount of women over an 8-year period. He is also suspected of being the most prolific serial killer in all United States history. At the absolute minimum, Watts is responsible for 14 murders, but at the absolute most, he is responsible for over 100 murders. Keep in mind, this was only through an 8-year period. Wild. All of which of these murders took place within Michigan. Watts would stalk his victims, break into their homes, and then kill them using various methods, such as stabbing or strangulation. Watts was arrested in 1982 and was sentenced to life in prison, where he died of cancer in 2007. Minnesota. Paul Michael Stefani. Stefani, also known as the Weepy Voice Killer, was a serial killer who murdered at least 3, you guessed it, women in Minnesota during the early 1980s. He gained his nickname from his tendency to call emergency services after committing his crimes in a sobbing, high-pitched voice. Stefani was caught in 1982 after 2 years of being active and later confessed to the murders. He was sentenced to 40 years of prison and, like some others on this list, died of cancer in prison. Mississippi. Glenn Edward Rogers. Glenn lived a very transient lifestyle and for that reason killed in many different states and lived in many different states. But for the purpose of this video, we're focusing on Mississippi. Glenn is convicted of 2 murders, suspected of 3 more, and claims over 70 total. Glenn was active from 1993 to 1995. And during that time, he worked as a handyman and also, you guessed it, killed women. You can probably guess how as well. Something interesting about this guy though is the fact that he actually was on the FBI top 10 most wanted fugitives list and was caught after a nationwide manhunt. Currently, he's on death row in Florida. Missouri. Robert Berdella. Burdella was a serial killer from Kansas City who was known as the Kansas City Butcher, or more ominously, the Collector. He was active during the 1980s, and during this time, he killed at least 6 young men. Yeah, different. He would lure his victims, who were often young men, into his home where he would subject them to prolonged periods of captivity and torture, typically including assault, and always ended in murder. After being active for 3 years, Burdella was caught in 1988 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. He ended up dying in jail 4 years later in 1992 at the age of 43. Montana, Nathaniel Bar Jonah. This case specifically is quite upsetting and disturbing. Jonah was primarily a child assaulter and was only a suspected serial killer and cannibal. And although he has 0 confirmed murders, he has 5 suspected murders and 10 plus confirmed victims that are children that survived. He was active from 1964 all the way until 1999, which is just heartbreaking. At least in 1999, he was apprehended and convicted with assault, kidnapping, attempted murder, and child assaultation, and was given 130 years in prison at the Montana State Prison, where he died in 2008. Gross. Nebraska, Charles Starkweather. This case has one of the fastest timelines on this list. Starkweather was a serial killer who, along with his girlfriend, killed 11 people in the span of only 2 months. The rampage began with the murder of a gas station attendant, and this snowballed into a series of robberies and killings, including the murder of some of his girlfriend's family members. After this 2-month killing spree, the pair was caught in Wyoming after a high-speed chase. Starkweather was sentenced to death and was executed a year later after being caught in 1959. So let me break it down for you. This guy was 18 years old, decides to go on a 2-month killing spree, and is executed via the electric chair only 6 months after being put on death row. He died at the age of 20. That is quick justice. His girlfriend, on the other hand, who was his accomplice, was only sentenced to 17 years in jail. Wild. Nevada. Carol Cole. This is the first man I've ever seen named Carol, so that's something. Cole was a serial killer who was convicted of strangling 2 women in Nevada and murdering 3 others in Texas. This is pretty typical. What's not as typical is that he is believed to be linked to at least 30 other murders between 1947 and 1980. A huge 33-year gap of being an active potential killer. Wild. Cole was sentenced to death for his crimes, and for his last meal, he had jumbo fried shrimp, french fries, and salad with French dressing, and Boston clam chowder. And the next day, he was executed via lethal injection on December 6th, 1985. New Hampshire. Sheila LaBear. In 2008, Sheila was convicted for murdering 2 of her boyfriends in 2005 and 2006, respectively. And she claims that she did this because she was sent by God as an avenging angel to Earth to punish pedophiles, which in her mind included her 2 boyfriends, whose bodies were found on her huge farm. Now you might be like, all right, I can get behind this a bit, I get it. Here's another twist. According to Brad Bailey, a defense attorney who represented her, he says, and I quote, "There seemed to be no basis whatsoever in reality to suggest or claim any of her victims were pedophiles or engaged in any of these child abusing behaviors. None whatsoever." So yeah, not only did she murder people, but she also tried to ruin their name. Sheila typically met her victims by putting out personal ads looking for farmhands on her farm. Although she was only convicted of the murder of 2 men, she also admitted during her trial that she killed several others, but these were not confirmed. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. New Jersey. Richard Biegenwald. Biegenwald was active from 1958 all the way till 1983. And during this time, you guessed it, he murdered people. In 1983, he was convicted of 5 murders, but was suspected of 8. An interesting fact is, after this serial killer died, his lawyer actually mentioned publicly that this criminal told his lawyer that he may have up to 100 victims, which is likely inflated, but the fact is this monster likely had many more victims than he was convicted for, which doesn't seem extremely uncommon for this list. Richard was actually on death row for a short amount of time, but it was overturned and he was resentenced to life in prison, where he still died in prison in 2008. New Mexico. David Parker Ray. Ray was a suspected torturer who is also known as the Toy Box Killer. This case is really interesting because he technically has 0 murders confirmed, but has 3 confirmed victims and possibly anywhere from 60 to 100 plus victims that he tortured and assaulted on his property in his toy box, which was basically a trailer beside his home, which is a movable, portable torture chamber that he had a large kidnapping and assault operation happening in there. Crazy. For the unthinkable amount of torture that he inflicted upon potentially hundreds of women, Ray was sentenced to 224 years in prison, where he unfortunately only served a few months because he died of a heart attack. Unfortunate he didn't serve more time. Not unfortunate that he died. Ray was a serious monster and is even quoted saying that he did nothing wrong to women. He only did what women wanted, and he got pleasure from their pleasure. And his assault on these women was, in his mind, him doing good for society. So he thought it'd be total sicko. New York. David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam or Mr. Monster, according to Wikipedia, was a serial killer who terrorized New York City in the summer of 1976 and 1977. Berkowitz, surprise, surprise, targeted young women and couples, shooting them in cold blood with a .44 caliber revolver. His crimes sparked a citywide manhunt for him, and he even left notes taunting the police, promising more crimes. Fortunately, Berkowitz was caught in 1977 and later confessed to all of his crimes, which were plentiful. He ended up murdering 6 people and wounding 11 more. He is currently in jail serving 6 life sentences as we speak. North Carolina. Henry Louis Wallace. Wallace may have one of the most odd nicknames on this list. He is known as the Charlotte Strangler, which is somewhat tame, but he's also known as the Taco Bell Strangler. This video is not a laughing matter, but that name is weird. I guess it's because he worked as a manager at Taco Bell in Charlotte. Wallace was a serial assaulter and murderer, targeting young African-American women, and over the course of a 4-year span, he victimized over 9 women. He was caught in March of 1994 and currently sits on death row awaiting execution. North Dakota. Eugene Butler. The story of Butler is unlike anything we've heard on this list so far. He is the only killer who was never convicted of his crimes so far on this list. Eugene Butler was born in 1849 in New York State, but all of his crimes took place and he actually died in North Dakota. But we'll get into that. From the years of 1900 to 1906 in Niagara, North Dakota, Butler murdered 6 teenage boys in his house and buried the bodies in his basement. Now, the twist of all this, Butler was actually committed to an insane asylum for unrelated charges where he died in 1913. The crazy part is the bodies that were buried in his house were not found until 1915, 2 years after Butler died in the insane asylum. Super weird. Ohio. Anthony Sewell. The story of Sewell is something we've heard numerous times on this list so far, so I'll keep it brief. He had a generic name. He was known as the Cleveland Strangler. He was active for 2 years, from 2007 till 2009. He murdered at least 11 women who he targeted, specifically women that were vulnerable. By that, I mean women that were either dealing with addiction or homeless. And he was arrested in 2009 when one of his victims escaped and alerted authorities. He was convicted of multiple counts of murder and was sentenced to death in 2011. Sewell died in 2021 due to an unspecified terminal illness. Oklahoma. Roger Dale Stafford. Stafford was a serial killer active from 1974 until 1978, and in this time he had 9 confirmed kills, which he was evicted of, but potentially a lot more. Stafford started his killing spree by killing an assistant manager working at a McDonald's. After killing this manager, he robbed the McDonald's for over $1,300 and then continued on his spree. His next targets were a family that he flagged off the side of the highway, who he robbed and murdered the entire family. 3 weeks later, he robbed a sirloin stockade in Oklahoma City, and during this robbery, murdered 6 employees, most of these victims being teenage staff members. 6 days after this restaurant massacre, Stafford was found and apprehended. Unsurprisingly, he was sentenced to death, and in 1995, he was executed via lethal injection. Oregon. Dayton Leroy Rogers. Dubbed the Molalla Forest Murderer due to the fact that he would dump the bodies of his victims in the Molalla Forest in Oregon. Rogers was a serial killer who was active for, once again, 4 years and targeted, once again, vulnerable women, specifically addicts, sex workers, and the like. Rogers notably was sentenced to death 4 times, with each sentence being overturned by the Oregon Supreme Court. And in 2021, his death sentence was overturned again due to new laws, and in 2022, his sentence was commuted to life without parole. Pennsylvania. Gary Heidnik. Gary was a serial kidnapper, torturer, and murderer, and fortunately was only active for just over a year. During this year, he kidnapped 6 women, 2 of which died from his torture, and the other 4 fortunately survived. One of these surviving victims was actually able to go to the authorities and inform them about Gary's horrendous actions. Gary was quickly arrested in March 1987 and convicted of multiple charges, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, assault, aggravated assault, and more. He was sentenced to death, and in 1999 he was executed via lethal injection and was one of the last people to ever be executed in the state of Pennsylvania. Rhode Island. Craig Price. I believe Price is the youngest killer we've seen on this list, with his first murders taking place when he was only 13 years old. From the ages of 13 to 15, he committed 4 murders of women in his neighborhood, and he was arrested at the age of 15. Due to his age, he was actually initially set for release at the age of 21, which to me is mind-boggling for someone who murdered 4 people, no matter their age. But due to ongoing violent behavior within prison, he was sentenced to a much longer time and actually tried as an adult. He will likely never see the light of day. South Carolina. Donald Henry Gaskins. Gaskins was born in 1933 and unfortunately had a huge span of crimes in his lifetime, starting in 1953 and going all the way until 1982. During this time, he had 15 confirmed kills and later on claimed he had up to 110. He killed hitchhikers, acquaintances, and more, and had a laundry list of charges under his belt. A couple notable things about Gaskins is the fact that when he was arrested, he was actually sentenced to death, but then was later commuted to only life in prison, but then later killed someone in prison using a bomb, and because of that was once again sentenced to death and later executed in prison in 1991. Dude literally got off death row and got right back on with a bomb somehow. Crazy. South Dakota. Robert Leroy Anderson. Anderson was your run-of-the-mill creep. He was an assaulter and killer. He has at least 2 confirmed victims across multiple states in the US, primarily South Dakota, and would typically lure victims by posing as a photographer wanting to take pictures of people. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 1984, and in 2002 died in prison while waiting for execution. Tennessee. Paul Dennis Reed. Reed was also known as the fast food killer, specifically because he targeted fast food workers working the late shift. He would rob, assault, and murder these employees, and was sentenced to death for the murder of 7 fast food employees in the Nashville metropolitan area. Reed was sentenced to death and died in 2013 while waiting for execution. Fast food employees really deal with too much. Texas. Dean Corll. Corll, also known as the Candyman or the Pied Piper, was a mass serial killer, serial assaulter, and serial torturer, and was a member of the Houston mass murders, which at the time of its discovery were considered the worst example of serial murders in the entire history of the US. Corll was known as the Candyman because his family had previously owned and operated a candy company in Houston, and he personally had been known to give free candy to local children, which is the most stereotypical and scary thing I've ever heard. And he was known as the Pied Piper because his murders would typically start with him luring people, typically with the offer of a ride or for an invite to a party. From the years of 1970 to 1973, Corll and his 2 accomplices murdered at the very least 28 victims. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how much time Corll got because he was never sentenced. He was actually murdered by one of his accomplices before he was ever caught, which may be good or bad news depending on how you look at it. After this accomplice killed Corll, they called the police and promptly confessed to all of the murders, leading to the discovery that shocked Houston to its core. Utah. Ted Bundy. If you're watching this video, you definitely know who Ted Bundy is, and I probably don't need to tell his story. But as a quick recap, he has an unknown amount of victims, but it's likely believed to be in the range of 30 to 36. He was active during the 1970s and was executed in 1989. If you want more details, watch this video. I go in extreme depth about his story. He is a great example of why you should never judge a book by its cover. Vermont. Israel Keyes. Keyes is a very strange serial killer. He was extremely meticulous in his planning, but extremely random in his selection of victims. He murdered at least 11 people across multiple states, including Vermont, between 2001 and 2012. And Keyes even had a specific method of burying what he called kill kits in different locations so he could commit murder at any time. He was captured in 2012 and didn't continue living, I'm not going to say unalive because that's the dumbest thing ever, while awaiting trial, leaving so many questions unanswered about his motives and the true extent of his crimes. Virginia. Timothy Wilson Spencer. Spencer was active from 1994 to 1998, once again, 4 years, committed 5 assaults and murders, and was sentenced to death by electric chair, not lethal injection. Washington. Gary Ridgway. Ridgway was active from 1982 to 1988, confirmed, and was possibly active as recent as 2001. He was arrested on November 30th in 2001 and confessed to murdering at least 71 women, many of whom were vulnerable women, like we explained before. This unfathomable kill count made him one of the most prolific serial killers in US history. In 2001, he pled guilty to 48 counts of murder to avoid the death penalty and is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. It's crazy crazy how someone with 71 murders can actually avoid the death sentence. Whether you're for it or against it, it's crazy how somebody with 2 murders can get the death penalty, but someone with 48 confirmed at the very least can get around it. West Virginia. Harry Powers. Powers was an active killer in the 1930s and was particularly evil because he preyed upon vulnerable, lonely widows who had just lost a loved one. He would meet them on classified ads in the newspaper and would murder them for their money. During his time active, he killed at least 5 women and 3 children before being caught. He was tried, convicted, and executed in 1932. Once his story gained national attention, it was considered to be a contributing factor to people's fear of meeting people through classified ads in the newspaper. Wisconsin. Jeffrey Dahmer. Much like Ted Bundy, this demented monster likely needs no introduction. His story has been told many times, and his infamy is widespread. If you want an in-depth review, here's a video where I discuss his story at length. In short, he murdered and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He primarily targeted black young men, luring them into his home with the promises of sex or money. He did unspeakable things to his victims' bodies and was arrested in 1991 and sentenced to 16 life terms in prison, but was only killed a few years later in 1994 by a fellow inmate. Wyoming. Dale Wayne Eaton. Eaton was a suspect in a string of murders known as the Great Basin Murders, which took place from 1983 to 1997, where over 9 victims, most of them being teenage females, were assaulted and killed. Eaton was sentenced to death, but the sentence was commuted to life in prison. And ladies and gentlemen, there we have it. One serial killer from every single state. There was honestly a surprising amount of similarities across the board. Notably, at least to me, were the fact that a lot of these murderers were able to get away for 4 years. That was a pretty common trend. And every killer has some weird nickname, like the something strangler, which is the most common. It's like being a rapper and having Lil in your name. And a very unfortunate and upsetting trend is that almost every serial killer was also a serial assaultist, except for one guy. One guy, or maybe 2 of these guys, was a robber that murdered people. Not necessarily much better. The richest people from every state in the United States of America. Alabama. Jimmy Rain. Jimmy Rain is a 77-year-old billionaire with a net worth of $1.5 billion. What is he known for? Well, he's the founder and CEO of Great Southern Wood Preserving. I guess he's known for popularizing the lumber business by starring the cowboy Yellow Fella in his commercials. Let me know if you've seen this guy. I'm Canadian, so I've never seen the Yellow Fella. And quick fun fact, Jimmy Rain is the only billionaire in Alabama. Alaska. Leonard Hyde. Leonard Hyde is the president of JL Properties, a commercial real estate development company in Anchorage, Alaska. Hyde has a net worth of $400 million and is actually tied for richest person in Alaska with his own business partner, Jonathan Rubini. Rubini is the CEO of JL Properties, and each of them own 50% of JL Properties. The company owns real estate in Anchorage, Florida, and Utah. And in their free time, they like throwing polar bears at poor people. I made that last part up, but it's kind of believable. Arizona. Ernest Garcia II. Ernest Garcia owns Drive Time Automotive, a used car retailer, and he is also the largest shareholder in Carvana, an online used car dealer founded by his own son, Ernest Garcia III. Ernest Garcia II has a net worth of $8 billion. And fun fact, in 1990, he pleaded guilty to bank fraud charges. Really cool stuff. Arkansas. Jim Walton. Jim Walton is the youngest son of Walmart's founder, Sam Walton, and him and his siblings have inherited a total of over $78 billion. Jim sat on Walmart's executive board for over a decade before he gave his seat to his son, and is now the chairman of the family's bank, Everest Bank Group, which has $26 million in assets. I know we're early in the list, but so far he is the first entry in the list who gained his sizable net worth through inheritance. California. Mark Zuckerberg. Zuck has a net worth of over $177 billion and is currently the 3rd richest person in the world. He is the co-founder of Meta, the parent company that owns Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads. Mark became the world's youngest self-made billionaire in 2008 at the age of only 23. I want to make a joke, but that's honestly insane. Mark and his wife Priscilla have pledged to give away 99% of their Meta holdings throughout their lifetime. And Mark, if you're watching, I'd gladly take some. Colorado. Philip Anschutz. I would just like to remind you all that these people, although they're way richer than you or I, they still are just like the rest of us. Philip, for example, puts on his pants one leg at a time, and shits just like everyone else. Get it? And shits Okay, I spent most of my time on that joke, but Philip built his fortune by discovering an oil field in 1979 and by investing in railroads. He also founded AEG, his entertainment company which owns major sports teams, venues, and the Coachella Music Festival. His net worth is over $15 billion. Connecticut, Stephen Cohen. Cohen is a hedge fund manager and a sports team investor. Cohen currently oversees Point72 Asset Management, a firm with over $35 billion in assets under management. And before this, ran SAC Capital, one of the world's most successful hedge funds ever. Now, he was forced to shut down SAC Capital after he pleaded guilty to insider trading and ended up paying a total of $1.8 billion in penalties. So those two are probably unrelated, but anyways. Cohen also bought the New York Mets in 2020 for $2.4 billion, the highest sale price ever for an MLB team. And throughout the course of his career, Cohen has given over $1 billion to philanthropic causes, including causes related to veterans and children's health. Delaware, Elizabeth Snyder. Snyder is the first woman on this list, and her parents founded W.L. Gore and Associates in 1958, which is a manufacturing company with over 7,000 patents. Their most profitable invention is Gore-Tex, a waterproof fabric that is extremely popular in outdoor gear. Elizabeth owns 5.5% of the company, which does about $2.5 billion a year in sales. One fun fact is that Gore-Tex was actually invented by accident by Elizabeth's brother, who was trying to stretch Teflon. Oh yeah, and she's worth 800 mil. Florida, Jeff Bezos. CEO and entrepreneur, born in 1964, Jeffrey Bezos, who was at one point the second richest man in the entire world, and currently has a net worth of over $200 billion. He founded Amazon in 1994 and currently still owns 9% of the company. And one of his most impressive feats was not the fact that he is a space cowboy billionaire, but the fact that his head is incredibly shiny. Good job, Jeff. Georgia, Dan Cathy. Dan Cathy is the chairman of Chick-fil-A, the fast food franchise founded by his father. He grew up doing odd jobs for his dad's restaurant and eventually became the CEO in 2013. And if you know anything about Chick-fil-A, you would know that they've never had any sort of online controversy. Dan is worth over $10 billion. And today, there's over 2,800 Chick-fil-A locations worldwide. Hawaii. Pierre Omidyar. Pierre founded eBay in 1995 and became a billionaire only 3 years later when it went public in 1998. eBay went on to acquire PayPal in 2002 for $1.5 billion. But that's part of a bigger story we'll get into later. He is personally worth over $6 billion. And from 2005 to 2020, Pierre has gifted at least $10 million worth of eBay shares per year, which is pretty cool. Once again, I'm open to receiving shares. Outside of eBay, Pierre also owns a stake in resorts in California and Mexico and is also developing real estate in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico as well. This dude's pretty boring, so let's keep going. Idaho, Frank Vandersloot. Now, hoes and sleuths aside, Frank is very rich. $3.3 billion rich. How, you may ask? Well, he is the founder and former CEO of Melaleuca Inc., an online seller of nutrition and wellness products. And according to Forbes, which is where a lot of this information is coming from, Melaleuca serves over 1 million customers per month, which is interesting because I've never heard of them and their website looks like poop. Illinois, Lucas Walton. If this name sounds familiar, you're not wrong. Lucas is also a member of the Walton family. Yes, that Walton family. Lucas Walton is the grandson of Walmart's founder, and he inherited his fortune when his father unfortunately passed away in a plane crash. He founded Builders Vision in 2021, which is an impact investing group, whatever that means. And he also chairs the Walton Family Foundation's Environment Program Committee, which sounds like a lot of buzzwords. Lucas is worth $28 billion. Indiana, Carl Cook. Carl Cook is the grandson of Captain Cook, and he inherited Captain Cook's fortune. I just realized his name's Captain Hook, not Captain Cook, so that made no sense, but we're keeping it in. Cook's story isn't as cool as Pirate Treasure. He's actually just the CEO of his parents' medical device company, the Cook Group. This company did $2.4 billion in sales last year. Carl Cook's estimated net worth is over $10 billion. Iowa. Harry Stein. First thing I'll say is that I'm glad this guy doesn't share a last name with this YouTuber, but even if he did, I don't think it would matter considering his net worth is almost $10 billion. Stein is an agricultural pioneer and the founder of Stein Seed, a corn and soybean seed company. This company owns around 800 patents to soybean and corn genetics and is one of the world's largest private seed companies through major licensing deals. And a bit of an inspiring fun fact, Stein is dyslexic and mildly autistic as well. Kansas. Charles Koch. Charles's net worth is almost $60 billion, which makes him richer than the last 5 billionaires combined. Charles is the chairman of Koch Inc., which is America's second largest private company by revenue, and it's held that title since 1967. Koch Inc. has done over $125 billion in revenue from its diversified portfolio of companies including pipelines, chemicals, software, automotive components, and even Dixie cups. Kentucky. Tamara Gustafson. Tamara is the heiress of the public storage empire. She made her billions through her family's self-storage business and as a prize-winning horse breeder, of all things. That's not a joke. Her dad co-founded Public Storage in 1972, and she today owns about 10% of the company. Public Storage operates thousands of locations in the US and in Europe. It's really interesting seeing how many people on this list are actually second-generation billionaires. I think we've only covered a few so far that have actually founded the company that's been generating millions. I guess it makes sense considering how large billions are. It may take a generation or two. Louisiana. Todd Graves. Todd Graves is the founder and CEO of Raising Cane's, a fried chicken fast food chain. I'll be honest, I've never tried it. We don't have them in Canada. But I have seen people drink their sauce out of styrofoam cups, so I'm assuming it's pretty good. Graves actually came up with the idea for the restaurant while in college, and his professor gave him the lowest grade in the entire class, and to pursue the idea, he was unable to get bank financing. So he worked as a boilermaker and salmon fisher to save up money. He launched Raising Cane's in 1996 using his savings, and now the company did $3.7 billion in sales last year alone and has over 800 locations in more than 40 states. Todd's net worth is almost $10 billion. Maine. Susan Alphond. Susan's story is actually really inspiring and something we can all aspire to. Harold Alphond founded the Dexter Shoe Company and sold the business to Warren Buffett in 1993 for $420 million in Berkshire Hathaway stock. When Harold died in 2007, his fortune was inherited by his daughter Susan and her 3 siblings. And Susan got a net worth of over $3 billion through inheritance. Wow. Inspiring. Maryland. Annette Lerner. In 1952, Annette lent her 26-year-old husband $250 to start a business. He went on to take that loan from his wife and turn it into one of the largest real estate development companies in the Washington, D.C. area. Through their wealth, the Lerners also bought the Washington Nationals baseball team, and unfortunately, in 2023, Ted Lerner passed away, leaving all of his fortune to his wife, Annette. Really came full circle. She is now worth over $6 billion. Massachusetts. Abigail Johnson. Abigail is the president and CEO of Fidelity Investments, and she currently owns 28.5% of the company. In 2022, she was named the second most successful woman in finance by American Banker and has been recognized for integrating mobile technology and cryptocurrency into the company's initiatives. Fidelity manages discretionary assets totaling over $5.5 trillion in value. And she's also graduated from Harvard, so this girl rocks. And she's also worth $30 billion. Michigan. Daniel Gilbert. At the age of 22 in 1985, Daniel Gilbert founded what would become Quicken Loans, which later became the largest mortgage lender in the entire US. Gilbert took Quicken Loans public as Rocket Companies in August of 2022 and has since originated $79 billion in mortgages since 2023. He also owns the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he and his companies have invested $5.6 billion to purchase and rehab buildings in downtown Detroit with a plan to create 24,000 jobs, which is cool. Gilbert also co-founded the sneaker platform StockX, which is interesting. I can imagine this guy with a $30 billion net worth and co-founding StockX has a pretty cool shoe collection. Nothing like mine though. Just check these out. Minnesota. Glenn Taylor. In 1975, Taylor purchased Carlson Letter Service, a wedding stationery business he worked for in college. He later transformed it into Taylor Corporation, a print services and communications company, which does over $2 billion a year in sales. Taylor also owns stakes in the NBA team, the Timberwolves, the WNBA team, the Lynx, and the United FC soccer team. But he has since sold his stake in both of the basketball companies. I guess billionaires just love buying sports teams. And his net worth is $2.8 billion, which is honestly kind of broke. Mississippi. Thomas and James Duff. The Duff brothers' father founded Tire Mart in 1973 and sold it in 1998. The brothers bought this company back in 2003 and then later started Duff Capital in 2007. The Duff brothers co-founded and co-owned Duff Capital, a holding company which now does over $5 billion a year in revenue with over 20 businesses. Thomas Duff is worth $3 billion. Once again, not sure how this guy's getting by. Missouri. John Morris. No, not John Morrison, the WWE superstar with the crazy physique. John Morris, the old guy, worth $10 billion. Morris is the founder and CEO of Bass Pro Shops, which I'm assuming you've heard of. It's an outdoor gear chain founded in 1972, and he started it out of the back of his father's liquor store, which is pretty cool. The company now does over $8 billion a year in sales, and Bass Pro Shop also acquired Cabela's for $5 billion in 2016. Montana, Dennis Washington. Dennis is a real old money dude. His wealth comes from owning copper mines, marine transportation, and heavy equipment businesses. But he did start from humble beginnings. He worked for his uncle's construction company and then later took out a $30,000 loan to start his own construction company, which he later turned into Washington Companies, which owns the copper mines and everything I just mentioned. He also invested in his son's company, C-SPAN Corp, which is a shipping container company that now has over 150 shipping containers, which is pretty cool. Dennis is worth $7 billion. I find it funny that this guy's a billionaire from mining copper because you don't have to dig underground for it. You can literally just find it in people's houses for free. Nebraska. Warren Buffett. No, not Warren Buffet. Warren Buffett, the billionaire, with a current net worth of around $133 billion. Buffett is one of the most successful investors ever, gathering his huge fortune through Berkshire Hathaway, his investment company, which owns brands like Geico, Dairy Queen, Duracell, and many others. And although this guy's a billionaire, he's pretty well known for being cheap. I'm pretty sure he still lives in a house that he bought for under 100 grand. In the last interview I saw with him, he drives an old Honda and eats McDonald's every day. So at least some of you can say you have something in common with a billionaire. He's promised to donate over 99% of his wealth, and so far he's given away over 60 billion. Shout out to Warren. Also, he's the 6th richest man in the world at the time of recording this. Nevada. Miriam Adelson. Take a wild guess. I blurted out. What is the richest person in Nevada rich from? Did you guess gambling? Because you're right. Although they weren't doing the gambling. They were profiting from the losses of your gambling, specifically your dad's crippling gambling addiction, which is the reason why you are currently having student loans. Miriam inherited her husband's fortune after he passed away in 2021, and she now owns over 50% of the Las Vegas Sands, a casino company that is valued over $34 billion. She's also bought a majority stake in the Dallas Mavericks from Mark Cuban in 2023, and before becoming a billionaire, she was actually a medical doctor as well, which is pretty cool. She is currently worth $35 billion. New Hampshire. Rick Cohen. Pretty sure this is the second Cohen we've had on this list, so there's that. Most of Cohen's wealth comes from Symbiotic, which is a warehouse automation company that partnered with Walmart to automate all of its distribution centers. He also owns C&S Wholesale Grocers, which is the largest grocery wholesaler in the US, with an annual revenue of over $33 billion. Rick is worth almost $20 billion personally. New Jersey. Rocco Commisso. Commisso is the founder and CEO of Mediacom, the 5th largest cable TV provider in the US. Commisso immigrated to America from Italy in 1962 at the age of 12, and his first job was playing the accordion during the movie theater intermissions. Talk about humble beginnings. New Mexico. Ron Corio. Just gonna give a quick poverty trigger warning because Ron is only worth $1.7 billion. I know. Embarrassing. On a serious note, Corio became New Mexico's first ever billionaire through Array Technologies, a solar tracking systems business he founded himself, which is cool to hear because there's been a surprising amount of inheritance on this list. He served as CEO of this company up until 2022 when he resigned right before the company's IPO, which is, to me, questionable. New York. Michael Bloomberg. Besides serving 12 years as New York City's mayor and running an unsuccessful presidential campaign, Michael Bloomberg co-founded Bloomberg LP in 1981, a media company and financial firm that has an estimated yearly revenue of over $13 billion. He's pretty philanthropic too. He gave away $3 billion in 2023 alone and has donated more than $17.4 billion in his lifetime to gun safety, climate change, and education, and a few other causes as well. Nice job, Mike. North Carolina. James Goodnight. This is by far my favorite name on the list. Mr. Goodnight definitely has a ring to it. If any of you want to call me that, feel free. James co-founded his analytical software firm in 1976. The software they developed is used to analyze agricultural data. And right now, the software is used by more than 80,000 organizations around the world, and the company brings in over $3 billion a year. Outside of this, Goodnight and his partner Saul, who is also a billionaire, have co-founded a private school, a country club, and a hotel. North Dakota. Gary Tharizald. Gary's a bit of a G. Look at this picture. This is the real picture on Forbes. Dude put a license plate on his ass. We'll let it slide because he's a billionaire. although just barely. His net worth is $1.2 billion. But he is North Dakota's only billionaire. In 1982, he purchased his first Super 8 motel, and since then he has built, owned, and operated over 480 hotels nationwide, which is pretty impressive. I'm sure you've at least seen a Super 8 motel, and if you've been unfortunate enough, you've maybe even slept in one too. Ohio. Les Wexner. Wexner founded L Brands, which is a global retail empire that includes Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, Abercrombie & Fitch, and more. Wexner got his start in 1963 when he used a $5,000 loan to start his own store, The Limited, which sold only shirts and pants. Two fun facts about this guy. One is that he bought Victoria's Secret for only $1 million in 1982 when it was just a small failing chain in San Francisco. And second fun fact, his ex-financial advisor was Jeffrey Epstein. Cool stuff. Who knew the guy selling women's panties would be associated with such weirdos? Oklahoma. Harold Hamm. Another banger of a name. Harold is the founder and chair of Continental Resources, one of the nation's largest independent oil companies. Ham started from humble beginnings, and I'm not even making this up, it says it on Forbes. He got his start picking cotton barefoot as a child and working at a gas station at the age of 16 to help support his family. He started a trucking company that hauled water to and from oil fields, and in 1971 he took out a loan to drill his first well. And as you can tell, it went pretty well. So yeah, oil and gas billionaire. Let's keep going. Oregon. Phil Knight. Knight co-founded Nike in 1964 with Bill Bowerman. Although he retired in 2016, Knight and his family still own 20% of Nike, which, if you didn't know, earned $51 billion last year. Knight personally is worth almost $41 billion. Knight and his wife Penny have donated $3.6 billion to charity so far, but he still kind of looks like a supervillain, so yeah. Pennsylvania. Jeffrey Yass. Jeffrey Yass, no joke, got his start as a professional gambler, and I'm just gonna leave it there because I think that says it all. Gambling will make you a billionaire and the richest man in your state. Do it now. And if you want a little bit more info, he owns a trading company now, which is one of the biggest trading companies in the world, whatever, and they own 7% of ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok, and he's worth $27 billion. But the most important part is that he's a pro gambler, which means that you can do it too if you start today. I hate the fact I need to do this, but I think I need to explicitly say that I am joking and being sarcastic about the gambling. Most gamblers give up right before they win big, so the chance of you becoming a billionaire is low because you likely don't have what it takes to stick with it. Rhode Island. Jonathan Nelson. Nelson has a net worth of $3.4 billion and founded Providence Equity Partners in 1989, where he was CEO up until January 2021. His firm has invested in over 170 companies, including Hulu, Warner Brothers Media, and the Yankees. South Carolina. Robert Faith. Faith is a real estate billionaire with a net worth of around $5 billion. He founded and is currently CEO and chairman of Greystar, which is a real estate investment company and investment management platform with over $34 billion in assets under development. South Dakota. T. Denny Stanford. Stanford owns First Premier Bank, which is a bank that specializes in offering credit cards to high-risk borrowers. His bank has 17 branches and is one of the largest issuers of MasterCards, many with steep rates and low limits. Predatory credit business aside, he is an active philanthropist, stating that he wants to die broke and saying he'll do this by giving away his credit company. So, kind of a G. Tennessee. Thomas Frist Jr. Thomas is a former Air Force flight surgeon that later went on to found Hospital Corp of America with his father in 1968. The company now owns and operates over 168 hospitals around the world and around 2,400 sites of care in 20 US states and the UK. Frist is worth over $30 billion. Texas. Elon Musk. I don't think this man needs any introduction as he's not only the richest man in Texas, he's the richest man in the entire world. Elon Musk is the co-founder of 7 different companies, including Tesla, SpaceX, and XAI. Say what you want about the guy, but he is extremely efficient, and the level of success he's been able to create is almost unfathomable. Musk has a net worth of over $200 billion, and is one of the younger billionaires on this list at the young age of only 52 at the time of recording this video. Utah. Gail Miller. I really wanted Gail Lewis to be on this list, but unfortunately, after she retired from Walmart, her net worth fell to second richest in her state. Miller owns the Larry H. Miller Group, which has interests in real estate, healthcare, finance, and entertainment businesses. I find it funny that they say interests. It's like, oh, they're just interested in it. They just have billions of dollars, but it's just an interest. They're not doing it. They're just interested with billions. The Millers initially gained their money by starting with a single Toyota dealership and then growing their dealer group to being the 8th largest in the entire company before selling it for $3 $3.2 billion. They later went on to purchase the Utah Jazz for $22 million in 1986 and sold the team in 2020 for $1.66 billion. Not a bad return. Vermont. John Abel. Abel co-founded medical device company Boston Scientific in 1979. Abel took his company public in 1992 and was listed as a billionaire officially in 1996. It doesn't seem like he's done much since that listing, as his net worth today is only $1.9 billion, but since 2001, he has donated over $130 million to charity, which is pretty cool. Virginia. Jacqueline Mars. Jacqueline is the granddaughter of Mars Incorporated founder Frank C. Mars, and she owns an estimated 1/3 of the iconic candy company. I don't want to give it away, but there may be somebody else who owns another third who may be the richest person in another state, but we'll get into that later. Washington. Bill Gates. Gates does a lot of stuff now, which I don't really want to get into, but he got his start by founding Microsoft, which is now valued in the trillions of dollars. With that being said, he only owns about 1.3% of Microsoft at this point, which is still insane. His current net worth is just over $100 billion. And one of the cooler things about him is this mugshot when he got pulled over for speeding in his brand new Porsche 911. Good choice. West Virginia. Brad Smith. West Virginia seriously needs to get their money up and not their funny up, because their richest person isn't even a billionaire. I know, laughable. His net worth is $900 million, so you're getting close, buddy. Brad Smith has served as the CEO of Inuit Softwares from 2008 to 2018, and then served as chairman up until 2022. Wisconsin. John Menard Jr. Menard Jr. founded Menards, the third largest home improvement chain in the US after Home Depot and Lowe's. The company has over 300 locations and did over $13 billion in 2023. John has a personal net worth of $25 billion, and the junior in his name is actually short for Junior Bacon Cheeseburger. Wyoming. John Mars. I told you he'd come back. Can you guess where his money came from? And can you guess his net worth? Well, it was already on screen, so John Mars's net worth is $38.5 billion, and his net worth also comes from the Mars family fortune. Congrats, bro. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The richest person from every single state in the United States of America. A lot of billionaires, a lot of old people, a little bit of bank fraud, and a little bit of philanthropy too. Let me know if you guys learned something, and let me know if you enjoyed this video. I'd like to make more like it if you like it. And